Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stronger with Time. I'm your host, Tony Battaji. In today's conversation, I sat down with Michelle MacDonald. Michelle is both a multifaceted coach and an athlete, having won 4 championships in physique competitions, including a world title. The reason why I wanted to talk to Michelle is that she has gone through the journey herself, starting with yoga and transitioning through to physique competitions. She has a very sensible, no-nonsense and evidence-based approach to coaching. The fitness industry often experiences 2 spectrums. It can be overly scientific, which doesn't reflect what is done in the real world, or it can be misled by the latest fad from influencers who often use sex differences in physiology to repeatedly tell women that they shouldn't train like males and need a unique training prescription. Michelle has coached thousands of women and has competed at the highest level herself. In other words, she knows what works in practice and what's a fad or a gimmick that's used to sell books or courses. As a fitness coach, Michelle is the founder of the Wonder Woman, which is a team of female fitness coaches. She specializes in physique preparation, nutrition, flexibility training, mental preparation, long-term lifestyle transformations. She is a highly regarded coach for women of all ages, abilities, and backgrounds, particularly now focusing on strength training and nutrition for women over 40. We covered a wide range of topics, including the challenges of training women, particularly around menopause, and the critical role of communication in coaching. Michelle also shares the most inspiring story of her mother's fitness transformation, highlighting the power of community and consistent effort. This was a real joy to have a conversation with Michelle. Without further delay, please enjoy my conversation with Michelle MacDonald. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me.
Tony, it is such a pleasure to be here.
It's great to connect.
Long time coming, yeah.
Yeah, great to connect. And you have many hats that you wear as a business person and as a coach and as an athlete. We only have 24 hours in the day, so people like you, I'm in awe of how much you do. But today I really want to talk to you about your role as a coach, but also how much being an elite athlete has informed your practice, your decision-making and so forth. So how long have you been coaching now?
Well, I started coaching when I started teaching yoga way back in 2003. Believe it or not, you can compete in yoga, and I fell in love with the practice. So that's really where I started. I would say coaching, which is a lot of mindset and a lot of structure and strategy, right? And accountability and motivation and all of that. But then in terms of bodybuilding, that was 2012. So I transitioned from yoga to resistance training, strength and conditioning training back in 2010 personally. And then I started coaching in 2012. And I never looked back. I love it.
And what made you change from something that really promoted lengthening and mobility and breathing to something that was high contractile and effort?
The yoga, that's a great question. Really great question. I'm pulled back to the beginning. So the yoga that I did was a very specific kind of yoga. It was called Bikram yoga, sort of fallen out of popularity. But when I started, it was really the rage. It's this hot yoga, 26 postures. You do the same series every single time you go, and it's a 90-minute practice. And funnily enough, Bikram Chuduri, who was the originator of this series, he studied under Bishnu Ghosh. And Bishnu Ghosh was an IFBB judge. He coached the first Indian Mr. Universe, Monatosh Roy, who competed against Steve Reeves. He won, I don't know which show he won, but it was in London. And he was known for like going to university very, very tiny, very under-muscled, and without lifting weights, I believe, or some crazy story like that. Maybe it's a hyperbole, but he added a significant amount of muscle. This is way, way, way back in the day. And so his yoga was a blend of, Bikram would tell us stories, and he's Indian, right, about how they would eat meat and all this protein. We saw pictures of him in his heyday, and he was an incredibly muscular guy. And all of these yogis that were training under Vishnu Ghosh were very, very muscular. And what's often forgotten about yoga is it's not just, we think of yoga as all this stretching, right? But the yoga that the yoga that can be done is actually really bridging that gap between the autonomic nervous system and the nervous system that we're controlling with our mind. And we do that through the bridge of the breath. But they take it even further and can demonstrate, and you can see this on, I think, shows like That's Incredible, they can slow down their heart rate significantly. They can fold themselves into little tiny cubicles. You can walk an elephant over them with a door with spikes in it and it won't puncture them. And all kinds of strange things like this. And when we think of being able to, just with your mind, right, or your CNS, being able to give a stimulation to a small muscle in your arm, right, like your ulnar, your radial, and just trigger that. Now, we do that with, guys do it with their pec muscles, right, and we can do it with our biceps. Now, as a coach, you know that once you start talking about the trapezius muscles, the muscles on the back side of the body, even some people have trouble firing their lats or proper glute engagement, we see how far we can fall from that kind of mind-muscle connection. But these guys, this tradition of yoga that Bikram yoga comes from, they were able to have incredible mind-muscle connection with a myriad of their muscles. So when we think of some of the advanced postures that we do, and I'll stop here, to do those postures, it's about mind, muscle, and neurological control at such an incredibly deep level. It's far beyond stretching, far beyond stretching. I think of doing a handstand and putting my feet over my head on a box. It's an incredible feat of athleticism and deep yoga, deep mind-body connection. So that's what I would say to that. And then for me, that transferred incredibly well to bodybuilding. And I think that's what gave me this advantage when I got into it, was because now I'm applying weight to what I was already doing, controlling my muscles and controlling my body through yoga. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of other follow-up questions, and I'm interested in how you then took that approach into your coaching, because you would have already had that awareness, the mobility, the mindset to apply to growing muscle. So then you got into the field of growing muscle, and then you have competed competitively over the years and have been a world champion more than once.
World champion once. I won four titles, but one world champion.
Okay. An incredible accomplishment. And how long has your athletic field now been?
In bodybuilding? Mm-hmm. In fitness, physique athlete, bodybuilding. 2010. So.
Okay. 15 years.
Yeah. I love it. I love competing. It's so much fun. It's the celebration for all of the hard work that I also love doing every day in the gym.
What kind of lessons have you learned from yoga going into your coaching practice? And you work exclusively with females?
Yeah, I'm just with women, which I love. Easy choice. Not that I don't love men, but I love working with women. And so I want to make sure I'm answering the question right. How does the background in yoga transfer to coaching women?
Exactly. Do you find that you need to spend more time on mobility and flexibility, more time on drills to bring awareness to specific muscle groups?
It's a great question that you asked. And as I was preparing for this call, I love innovating. I love changing things, making them better. One of the things I say to my coaches is the things that you're doing next year, a year from now, even though the things you're doing today are great, your hope is always that when you look back a year from now, you'll say, oh, wow, I've changed so much. I do things so differently right now. And in preparing for this call with you, it underlined to me that there's gaps in how I'm doing things, gaps for a reason, because, and this is an interesting segue into the mindset piece, but especially as I've aged, my clientele have aged with me, and it's it's becoming increasingly important to do a lot of the more foundational things, not to the point of preventing somebody from progressing towards their goal, but making sure that we are ticking off those boxes in a very, very impactful way. And I think I'll throw that back to you, Tony. You do a fabulous job of that. I enjoyed working with you, and I know my colleague Hattie had an incredible experience working with you, and you're doing great work now with speaking to the science, what's true and what science can't really say right now about training the older female athlete. So I would say that one of the things, well, a couple of things that I pull from, that I've always pulled from yoga, is the breath, whether it's a gal posing on stage or whether it's somebody working through a challenge in their life, or being aware of things like their breathing during training. The breath is an incredibly important tool that I pulled from yoga myself. So that's one thing that I think has been important to me, making sure that you are looking at your mobility and preserving that. So one thing that I've always said since I've been teaching yoga and transferring over to training, people would say to me all the time, like, I think my first competition, actually, I was backstage. This was back in the day where you were able to do all kinds of crazy things in your theme wear round. And I had a plan to go out there on stage, roll out a yoga mat, take off my heels, and go do scorpion pose, which is in scorpion and tiger. So I was going to land on my forearms, bend my legs over my head, and put my feet on my head. And I was in the back wing doing all these back bends to warm up, and girls were going by me and they were just, what is this girl doing? And they were so inspired. A lot of them said, I got to get into yoga. I got to start stretching more. And I would hear it all the time. Doesn't lifting weights, doesn't that make it harder to be flexible? And my answer, it was kind of cocky. My answer was, lifting weights won't make you inflexible. Not doing flexibility training is going to make you inflexible. And I hold that true to today. And I actually don't do a lot of yoga anymore. I do my basic warm-ups like world greatest stretch and squat to reach and things like that. But enough to know, do I still have a great kind of youthful mobility and flexibility, right? They're a little bit different. Cossack squats and all of that, Turkish get-ups and pistol squats. As every now and again, I'll just do one to see if I still have it. And as long as I still have it, I'm good to go. I think if I regressed, I would probably introduce some of that training. With my clients, it's really a matter of making sure they're not skipping their mobility work in the beginning and their cool downs afterwards. So it's sort of like, my clientele are incredibly busy women. A lot of them, when they start out, they're interested in fat loss. Hopefully I do a great job of this, convince them to focus on body recomposition, right? So yes, we're going to lose body fat. We're also going to do these other things to make sure you're gaining muscle. On the front end, mobility. On the back end, flexibility and stretching, right? And calming down your nervous system and being in touch with your breath. So it's sort of doing the best I can with the time I have, knowing, and this is what I mentioned earlier, the mindset piece, the hook is, we're going to get you back into your fighting shape, because that's really, really what they want. And they don't want it to take 4 years. So that's, I would say, how I pull from my experience with yoga, thread that into what I do with my clients, and make sure that I'm giving them something that they can do consistently, and they're getting the outcomes that they're paying for. They're getting the outcomes that they want. I'm very careful with that. One of my yoga teachers that I adored, Mary Jarvis, when I was getting into flexibility, I couldn't yet do that scorpion pose where you put your feet on your head. And I said to her, I was so eager, I said, okay, Mary, tell me what I need to do. Like, how many back bends a day do I need to do to be able to do this thing? And she looked at me in all of her wisdom. She was a gymnast teacher originally. And she said, You do as many back bends as you can commit to every single day. That is how many back bends you should do. And that has always stuck with me, Tony, the wisdom of it, right? Like, you should do as much mobility, strength training, cardiovascular training, stretching as you can consistently do, because that is what's going to move the needle, right?
I love
And
that.
that all or nothing gets women into trouble.
I love that. I think your experience is the same as mine, that yes, we have many females who've come from a yoga background, but I think there's a stereotype that females are just more flexible and don't need it. But my experience is absolutely, especially with aging, I place a greater premium on moving better, moving through a greater range of motion.
Yeah.
Promoting a range where we need it so we can get them into loaded positions that we want, that keep the ankles or the knees and the hips really healthy. And it sounds like you're doing the exact same thing.
Yes, it's interesting. We could have a whole other tangent on this subject, but one thing that I have always said, I've noticed this in coaching women in weightlifting, especially when it comes to things like squatting. And sometimes they'll go and they'll work with a coach in person, and they'll come back with all these ankle exercises, and I've got stiff ankles, or I've got stiff hips or something, and I say to myself, I say this to my clients, I want you to be curious here, right? Is it true that it is a flexibility issue? Or is it a mobility issue? And when we talk about mobility, we're talking about the strength, the ability to maintain a loading pattern in a range of motion. Let's say a full range of motion, full ankle and knee and hip flexion, and especially when it comes to muscles on the backside of the body, the posterior chain, and maybe adductors as well, and maybe tibialis. It seems that is what falls apart for women, especially of a certain age, if they haven't been training, they don't have a history of training full range of motion, versus their actual flexibility. When I look at my husband, or if you go into the average gym and you see your average 50-year-old middle-aged guys, maybe got a pot belly, he's got a desk job, but he squats ass to grass, pardon my French, no problem. He can't touch his toes. My husband's a perfect example of that. He's so inflexible. When he tries to touch his toes, his knees are bending, his legs are shaking, he's sweating, he's dying. But put 300 pounds on his back, no problem. He goes straight down. Look at his hack squat. He's eating his kneecaps. Interesting, right? So that's something that could be a whole conversation. What's really going on with a lot of women where they start to try to move with weight, or particularly the squat movement pattern? There's a lot of challenges there. And what we usually end up seeing is the hips going back, the torso kind of falling onto the top of the thighs. And so how do we as coaches, and I'm an online coach, how do we correct that in a reasonable amount of time so that we're getting them moving well and building muscle and gaining strength? I love that you do a lot of strength and mobility assessment. You really focus on building up the movement patterns. I also use a lot of machine work. If somebody's very, very limited, if I can. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes people are at home, right? And maybe we have a Smith machine, but maybe we don't. Maybe it's barbells and dumbbells. So
it's funny that machines have been demonized in the functional world of strength training, whereas we as coaches just use any tool that we have to get the range we want as safely as possible and just remove any barrier to exercise. What other issues do you see as commonalities with women as they are aging? When we train women in their 20s and early 30s, it's kind of like they're unbreakable. You can throw anything at them and they recover and everything's great. But then joint pain and tendinopathy and plantar fasciitis, all of these things we start bringing around menopause, especially in the few years leading into that transition. What do you see as common with the women in your age group that you train around menopause that you need to keep an eye out for?
Everything that you just said. I think shoulders also a big issue there, hip, knee issue, a lot of imbalances, and which I think is a lot of times it's now there's two things, right? There's people that have been training and been training well, and they not just training because they could be training with poor movement patterns and not recovering properly, and then they're just running themselves into a brick wall, right? But let's say you've got somebody that's been training for a while and training intelligently, and so they might have a different set of issues, or they may not be getting some of the issues, may or may not there's a question mark. But there is the question mark versus somebody who is undertrained and is out of shape, right? And then starts getting into it. And so they might have a lifetime of hunching over a desk, a lifetime of maybe they didn't get great, likely, especially if they're a Gen Xer or older, didn't get great counsel after giving birth, right? So their pelvic floor, their abdominal wall might be sustaining issues as well, and then compounded with posture, and now we all run around in Lululemons and all that thing. There's just not that reinforcement to have great core control. And leg length discrepancies, most of us are uneven, right side, left side, and when you're not doing corrective work on a regular basis, and then you compound that with time, 4 decades, 5 decades, 6 decades, with that imbalance, now you've got maybe some scoliosis, you've got adaptations, the fascial slings maybe are getting affected, likely, and from the ground up, from your foot as well, wearing shoes and even high heels, and just not having that awareness or even doing any kind of mobility or strengthening of the feet. These things can all really compound. So I think it's we're seeing the same things, I'm sure, with clients getting more injured or having more inflammatory issues, tendonitis, bursitis, that sort of thing, and needing to pivot, educate the client. We don't train through these things. Like, I really push that, Tony. We do not. I have to arm wrestle with my clients because they are gung-ho. But I believe that they trust me. We can't train through inflammation. We train through inflammation at our age, especially when there's the likelihood that we do have some degradation in the cartilage. You might have some osteoarthritis happening, some narrowing of the joint. When we get inflammation in there and we keep trying to do things, right now we're talking about getting lesions inside the joint capsule. We don't train through it, right? Instead, we back off. We make sure we do the things to bring that inflammation down, and we focus on something else that we can do, a different body part, right? Like, I have a gal that's just had a hip replacement surgery, amazing athlete, just a firecracker, metabolism of a hummingbird. And she's doing a bunch of foot and ankle strengthening mobility exercises. Her doctor gave her the okay to do some seated banded upper body movements, a little bit of light cable work. We're not doing anything for the lower body. She's really great shifting gears mentally from pushing to get on stage to focusing, taking that intensity and focusing on healing and working with professionals. And that's another thing that I really have to insist upon. You need to work with a great sports physio, which can be very hard to find in some countries, right? But a really great sports physio to help you with the rehab exercise. I can support them. What I prefer to do is write a program, have them look at it, give the thumbs up. That's how I like to work as an online, from a distance coach.
Yeah, there's two aspects here, isn't there? There are clients who come to us for changes in how they look, fat loss to gain muscle. But there's all the complications that you've just said that we experience, whether it's the knee or the foot or the shoulders. And we need to train those muscles before they can train according to the goal, or they just sustain an injury and they do too much too soon, or it's bad luck. And it's that mindset of being able to pivot, because we both share that mentality of, well, we don't stop training. Once you have that consistency and the habit, we don't stop, we just pivot. and we work on the grip, or we work on the elbows or the cuff or the feet, as you're doing in that situation. And we just move with what life throws at us.
Yeah, I think what's key is great communication. I work on a platform called True Coach, and so I mean, we could do videos, demonstrations. It's a really great platform to communicate on. Throw hyperlinks to videos and everything and anything under the sun. That's really key. I think if you're in person, of course, the person come in and see, but when you're online, as I am, it's very important that the coach and athlete have great communication. And it's not always the case that you have that. And then that's a different conversation to have. I think, right, especially with the older athlete, that has to get underscored, that you really have to show up and have that communication. I'll often have a gal, she'll try to explain something, like, oh, my shoulder hurts. And I'll say, send me a video, please, and show me the range of motion. Show me what you can and can't do, because that will really indicate to me what's going on. I do a lot of education. I think in the last week I've sent one gal I have in Quebec, I sent her 3 specialists that do shoulder surgery and 3 sports physios that specialize in shoulder rehab. The other gal with the hip surgery, working on foot and ankle mobility program for her. And then she just had an iron deficiency come in, really low iron. It's very strange. And so it's educating her on all the food sources of heavy and non-heavy iron and things to avoid when you're trying to get your iron levels up. And so it's a lot of that constant flow of communication without paralyzing. And this is important, because I've had clients come from other coaches where they haven't had a macro diet change because their macros aren't perfect. And I think that's wrong. Or they haven't progressed in a lift. I had one girl come in that was doing a 95-pound sumo deadlift. She's a 130, 140-pound athlete. And I thought, come on, we can progress this person. We can do some pause work. We can do some tempo work on her form, but progress her, right? And now she's at 170. We've been working together for about 6 months. And so that's key too. Like, I can't remember how Hattie said it was brilliant, right? Like, we want to address the weakness, but we don't want to withhold their strength. We don't want to withhold them from getting that enjoyment and that pleasure of being strong and progressing and doing a lift. So there is that nuance. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, between allowing somebody to progress and get strong and able, but being careful that they're not going to get injured. And sometimes I'll let somebody dance a little bit, and then I'll be, okay, we're going to pull back. We're going to regress this lift a little bit, start back again. I just regressed somebody's lift from deadlifts down back to pause deadlifts, because I felt like, okay, the weight's getting heavy now. Let's go back and work on taking a slack out.
And this is the wisdom of a coach, and you can't read that in a book, and they won't do a science study on it. And I think we need to lean more on experienced coaches who've worked with this demographic and ask, what challenges do you experience, and how do you get around regression of an exercise so that you don't, as it's often said, climb to the top of the mountain and then go all the way back down. Once you're at the top of the mountain, you need to stay there, and you need a squat pattern or a hip hinge pattern. But if your back is achy, can we put you on a hack squat or a leg press and keep training the extension at the hip and knee while giving that back a bit of a break? And just to double down on something you said before, I think communication between client and coach is something that we need to double click on. It's taken me sometimes decades with my female clients to say, it's okay to tell me you have a niggle. Don't diminish it. You have a sore knee. Don't work through it. Don't pretend it's not there. We can modify. It's okay. But I found that really challenging. The communication in a face-to-face environment is frequently not there.
Yeah, it's so important. I'm glad that you talked too about machine work, because, and I think that's too where my experience as an athlete comes into play, Tony, and also having my husband who has been an athlete. And the longer you're an athlete, you're going to have to navigate injuries. It's inevitable. I'd rather navigate an injury than have to navigate being detrained, right? Just no longer being able to do a vertical jump or something like that. Just want to get that out of the way. So I can speak to that, right? I can say, well, John Jack, he trained for a world championship and placed in the top 10 with herniation in two of his discs, right? All he did was leg extension, leg curl, and glute bridges. And calf rest. That's all he did, machine work. I've done, well, you know that because I work with you. I couldn't do any, and now I've got another niggle, right? And I have been able to do a squat pattern again on my left side. And it's like, well, what else can we do? So, of course, I'm in love with the leg extension, although I went to the gym yesterday and their seat was off their leg extension. So I said to Jay, we have to go to this other gym because they have that leg extension. And my identity is whatever it is I need to do to move forward, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to have pride in being able to pivot rather than staring at the door that's closed. So that's important to relay to athletes too, that it's not the end of the world. What's important is that we learn and we pivot, and we're going to pay down your ignorance tax by working with somebody who's done it. You don't have to make those mistakes. We're going to navigate around it and move forward doing things differently. And then using machine work or alternative exercises that can help assist with maybe a weakness in their body. Maybe it was their adductors weren't firing properly, right? Like maybe there was something else going on. Maybe it's glute engagement, oftentimes glute engagement, that has affected how you're moving, and you were compensating and potentially getting injured. It's not always the case, but maybe that's the case. So we can work on some of those things so you come back stronger than ever.
I think that's the key point, because when clients are given their program, they'll often think that's biblical and set in stone. And if we change it, or they give us the feedback that their back's hurting or their knee is hurting, and we change it, they think they're a failure. Oh, why do I need to change the program? What's wrong with me? And I always explain that if we swap a squat for a leg press or a leg extension, your muscle doesn't care. It's not like we take a biopsy of your quad on a squat versus one on a leg extension, and we can tell the difference under the microscope. Oh, that's the leg extension muscle. No. The muscle just wants that stimulation. So us as coaches are constantly pivoting and moving forward because, as you've said, rule number one, don't stop training, just change. And that communication between athlete and coach is so
and education too, because this is our passion. It's our everything. And I think you and I, anyone who loves coaching is continually learning and expanding their knowledge base. But our clients aren't doing that. By and large, they're probably killing it as running a marketing agency, or they're a CEO and founder of their own tech business or something like that. So they're relying on us to control their trajectory, but give them those bite-sized pieces of education so they understand and can be onboarded around the why. And that's something that's really important to me. And I know you're passionate about educating people too. I don't want people to be attached to me forever. I want you, if you, for whatever reason, go your own way. If I meet you in the street 3 years later, I want to be part of your history. And to the point where we can have a conversation and you're showing me how you took what you learned from me and you amplified it. You kept going further. And that means my job is to educate you why we're doing what we're doing so that you can do that. I don't want to be a gatekeeper of information and make people rely on me. I want them to be empowered. But it also means, and based on what you just mentioned to me, you've probably been in this situation where a client will change things, or usually they'll skip things and they won't message me. And I'll say, no, like, message me right away. That's what you're paying me the big bucks for, right? Like, get your piece of the pie, tell me what's going on, and then I'll modify it for you. I'll tell you this is how we're going to do it so that you can still get that win. And I want you to know why. So that's really key too. And it comes to that I think the feeling of I don't want to bother my coach, or I don't want to be always, especially if somebody's chronically getting injured or they have a lot of arthritis, I don't want to be that complaining person or whatever. So
Exactly.
people that are listening, don't do that. Whoever your coach is, they're there to help you, and they really want to be involved in helping you master the tools that you need to learn how to pivot and to either avoid injury or recover faster from injury. And it's something that I really love. I love when clients reach out to me and let me know what's going on. Most of my clients do, luckily, that I can go in and make the changes that are needed.
And I think by extension, if your coach then shames you and makes you feel bad for communicating an issue here and there, and it's your fault, then maybe find a new coach.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about time investment for people who are new to all of this. We're now at an all-time high with females realizing the importance of resistance training or a well-structured program for bone and muscle and mental well-being. When people say, how much time do I need to throw at this thing because I'm very busy? And again, this is a really big difference between females who are 20, who've got all the time in the world, and then a female who might be 50 and they'll say, how much time? Because I listen to Peter Attia and apparently I'm doing 8 hours of Zone 2 a week. Where am I finding that time? So what do you say is your minimal entry time if you really want to move the needle on health and fitness?
First of all, I'm going to say, whatever you can do in terms of getting yourself moving, do that. And I think of James Clear. I think he was talking about one of the people that he coached or that were part of his inner circle, and they had their client go to the gym and do, I think it was 5 minutes of something, and then leave. And this is somebody who had been morbidly obese for their entire life. And the reason that they did that was to really make it incredibly frictionless to get started. So I just want to say that, right? If you go for a walk, if going for a walk seems very foreign to you, right? If we're talking about the whole spectrum of people, the people that I work with that come to me, right? Because I can only work with a very limited number of people. I tell them, I want you to train 4 days a week. We're going to be in the gym 4 days a week, 60 minutes in the gym, and then warming up and cooling down, which can be another 10 or so minutes. So I want you to be able to budget that time. And most of my clientele either have really great home gyms. I have some clients with home gyms that are a gym, right? Leg press, hack press, glute abduction, hip machine. It's crazy. It's wild. Or we go to a gym that's close by. Or we maybe do a half and half. So we'll do a bigger machine, like a machine heavy workout, maybe on the weekends when they have more time. And then we'll do 2 sort of dumbbell workouts at home as a way to navigate that whole time piece. And that's something that we have the ability to do now that we're not just doing PDFs. If you do coach through an app, you can get in there, you can see what they're doing. It takes me literally a second to change a program. It's so easy to do. I love it. And then you can communicate quickly on the chat messenger. So that's where I am with my clientele. So there's a whole spectrum. You can just get off the couch, go for a walk. And there are apps, there are coaches that will teach the whole spectrum. Where I like to go, where I know that I can give you in a relatively short period of time, if you've been out of shape for most of your life, you're 50 years old, in 3 to 4 months, we can have a pretty radical transformation. Pretty radical. 4 days a week. Give me 4 days a week. And then I'm not talking about if cardio has to be overlaid, then that's, of course,
so let's
something
talk
else.
about that as well. So
Let's talk about cardio.
4 days is spent in the weights room, and we'll come back to that and talk about what you're doing there across a training year or across the years. How much emphasis do you put on cardiovascular? Is it a needs basis? Is it a request? Where do you see cardio training?
Cardio has been so demonized. I just don't even understand it. I had Alyssa Olenek, I hope I said Alyssa's name right, Olenek, on my podcast a while back, and that gal is just such a champion of hybrid training, right? And has done some great research. And when I'm really interested in longevity, And when I say the four times a week in the gym, this is women that need to build muscle, right? We're not talking about somebody who is in maintenance mode. They built their muscle, they're fine, they've got great body composition for their height, the amount of muscle mass they're carrying, the weight that they're carrying on their body. But people that really need to build muscle, I'm like, give me 4 days a week, okay? When it comes to cardio, I think we're looking at things like, where is that person's cardiovascular capabilities? Does she need to improve her actual capacity to do volume, her capacity to move well in that zone 2, or all the way up to zone 4 and zone 5? I think it is a tragedy to be a human being with a good income, or well, any income, but if you're paying for coaching and you're not learning how to move with power, with speed, I think that you're leaving money on the table. And I think that we hear so much negativity about cardio these days, which is wild to me. We know how it improves mitochondrial efficiency. We know that it improves the network of capillaries throughout the body. We know that it positively affects blood lipids. There's so many benefits to cardiovascular training. I think because it was overdone and that strength training was not underscored, we ended up, and then of course chronic undereating, we ended up with a different set of problems. But to vilify cardio is a tragedy, especially for the midlife woman. And we're hearing some really ridiculous claims, of course, that aren't substantiated by science, that certain kinds of cardio aren't appropriate for all women just because of our sex or our hormonal profile, which is just, I feel like we're going backwards a little bit. Maybe it's unintentional, but I do feel like we're going backwards a little bit. I was talking to Dr. Lauren Colenso. Oh gosh, I hope I don't say her name. Colenso Semple.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Lauren, and we were talking about that just yesterday, about how it seems like there is a shift in the conversation back into an almost anti-feminist standpoint, where women are being reduced to their hormones. Everything's about our hormones, and we can or can't do things because of our hormones. And it's so strange. What do you think about that?
I think the pendulum swings, and you nailed it, because females, by and large, were discouraged from going into the weights room, and it was for bodybuilders, and they were scared to go in, as a general blanket statement. And females would be runners and do a lot of cardio, often in low energy status. And then women have wholeheartedly embraced resistance training, but now the pendulum has swung the other way, and that is cardio is not doing what it said that it did, and it's worthless for your muscles, but it forgets that it's doing something different, that you need both. And you can't just focus on maximal strength or power training. You also need conditioning, and you need cardio, and all of these things together, which is what you do as a coach, brings it all together in a well-balanced program. But you're right. Females, by and large, have been reduced to, you need to do this, and it's very narrow recommendation. And that's an enormous disservice.
And it's based on a rodent study or a small cohort that's never been replicated, and the influencers pointed to this thing in PubMed on the background, but it's a narrative review or something.
Right.
I mean, it goes on and on and on. I mean, you understand how science works and how to read it and understand publishing. It's shameful, actually, what we're seeing happen. But this whole thing with cardio, it's got to stop. I actually wanted to put a post up about it and tag Alyssa in it, but it really does have to stop. It's people having pride in, I'm not doing any cardio. My coach removed my cardio. I'm just doing steps. I think if there's a reason why you're not training your cardiovascular system, or if it's really causing you psychological distress for whatever reason, that's one thing. But I do think that you're leaving, in terms of longevity and overall health, aging well, aging with vitality, which is what I'm passionate about, you are leaving some obvious money on the table.
Agreed. And the two largest trials have shown that more robust cardiorespiratory fitness is protective of all-cause mortality and cardiovascular disease to a greater extent than being overweight, smoking, hypertension. It's something that we forget about. But in the space of, as we age and females will lose fast-twitch fibers, weight training works on fast-twitch fibers. That's correct. But cardio training is doing something different, which
Different.
also needs to be done. Let's wrap up this conversation by talking about someone special to you, which is your mother. And you have played a profound, you've you've played a profound role in her life, in her last decade, I'll say. And she's obviously been an incredible influence in your life. Talk about where your mother was and where she currently is now, because it's just frankly an incredible inspirational story.
I'm so glad you asked about Mom. Can't wait to see her again. I'll see her in, I think it's 7 weeks. We're going to be in Copenhagen. So, yeah, well, my mom was a wonderful, wonderful mother. She gave me her time. And when it came time to have that role reversal where it was me spending time with her and being able to help her in the way that I could, it was because of the relationship that she had built with me. People ask about that all the time, and I joke with my mom when she's complaining that I'm giving her some coaching advice. I said, well, you made me, right? You created me so that I would be here to help you today. But it's that relationship that's really key, and I hope I do a good job of carrying that torch that she carried when I was just a little girl. She was an amazing mom. So my mom struggled. I grew up, my mom on diets. She did, I think it was Weight Watchers or Counterweight. I get a little confused.
Right.
She usually corrects me when I tell this story, but I did see her dieting for most of my life. She had a little scale, a little white scale, and she would put stuff in there, and she struggled. Or she would lose weight, and then it would go back up again. And man, if I could have my mom's physiology, like coach her when she was in her 20s or 30s, she is able to create muscle mass. She is so strong. I mean, she was a great athlete, but of course, in her generation and where she grew up, that was never her path. But anyways, I digress. She didn't know the blueprint for her body. Was very overweight for decades, had a partial hysterectomy. So she had her ovaries in her 40s. She had a big tumor. It turned out to be benign. That was removed, size of a grapefruit, something like that. No hormone therapy, not that it would have necessarily been needed, but they didn't track things like that anyways. Or my mom didn't have access to that kind of help. And just your typical stressful life and chronically under eating, and then having episodes of eating a lot, right? Which is, again, what I have found with most of my clientele coming to me. They're 60, 70, 80 pounds overweight, not because they're eating pizzas and hamburgers every day, not because they're binge eating. It's because they chronically undereat, and then they'll have 2 nights out with the girls and a 2,000 calorie meal, which can easily happen, especially if you have a cocktail or a glass of wine, you have appetizers that you don't usually have in dessert. So with my mom, it was really about getting her mobility back, getting her strength back, finding a routine that would work for her. And the hardest part was helping her to overcome the technological challenges of using an app to plan and track her meals. And that continues to be a challenge. I actually wrote her a meal plan. I gave her 2 different types of meal plans. So I did it using my app, and I emailed her the meal plan. I know what she likes to eat, and I just checked on her this morning. Mom, are you doing that meal plan? Because, and this probably will make sense to a lot of women, you get decision fatigue with all the things you're doing in life. And sometimes it's just easier to follow a plan versus having that freedom. And it can be something that you give someone that they might do for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then they get their legs back under them and they're doing things on their own. But for Mom, that was the big key. And in terms of community, making sure that she was really plugged into a community of supportive women doing similar things, pursuing similar fitness goals that were continually reinforcing this new identity. Now she's been at it for 8 years, but this new identity relative to most of her life where she is an athlete, meaning she's thinking about her nutrition, she's thinking about her sleep before she goes into a training session, doing that kind of calibration. How am I moving? How am I feeling today? Following a program, looking at her exercise history. These are all things that I feel constitute the athlete mindset versus haphazardly eating and going to the gym and picking up weights haphazardly. So being very
How long
intentional.
did that take for her to develop that mindset of, I am an athlete?
You know what? Great question. So at month 8, my grandmother passed away from mom. And so she had lost about 50 pounds at this time. Grandma was in a nursing home, and that was one of the levers that I used to push mom. I'm like, Mom, 2 years you're going to end up in a nursing home if you continue on your current trajectory. We got to change things, and you can change things now, and I can help you. I can help you do that. And so with her, when grandma died, she had to do the eulogy. I wrote her the eulogy. She had to present it. She doesn't love doing those speeches. She's so emotional. She had all the family coming in to visit as well at our house. My little brother, who's also a chef, we're both chefs, he came. I'm a chef, but I like cooking really macro-friendly food with lots of protein.
Right.
He's the opposite, like all the butter, all the salt. And we call it the joy cooking. And when I got up in the morning to go train, and I think I was on a reverse diet, and I love this whole lifestyle. There's no resentment or friction at all with me. But my mom, I wasn't too sure about. Well, she was up in the morning with me, with her gym clothes on, measuring out her food, with all of that other food on the table and everything. And I was like, wow, she's there. I didn't tell her to. I was fully expecting to go to the gym on my own. Like, I was like, yeah, it's your mom. You got the family here. I understand. I didn't even mention to her about going to the gym, actually. I didn't want to pressure her. But she was there of her own initiative. And she's always been like that. And even when she's gone through injury, right? She fell off her bike, hurt her shoulder. She was, what else can I do? Thinking about her food, controlling the controllables. And so that shift happened, I think, relatively early on for my mom. And she has not looked back. It's been incredible.
How old is she now?
She's 79. It's her last
Amazing.
year in her 70s.
How many days is she in the weights room a week?
4 days.
Just
Yep.
an inspiration.
Yep,
Michelle,
4 days.
you are doing wonders with her, but you're doing wonders with so many people who you coach. You're an athlete yourself. You're a coach. You're a businesswoman. You're a dog mom. You're a partner. You're a Wonder Woman. Thank you for your time today. Where can people learn about the wonderful work that you're doing in this space?
They can follow me on Instagram, Michelle MacDonald Official. Please follow my mom, Train with Joan, if you're not already. And if you have somebody who wants to get started, wants to start light, we have an app, the Train with Joan app. It has both at home and gym training, but it starts all the way from the beginning. People that are really just getting started, getting the mobility back. So it's a really great community over there, and I love what we've created with that. And then one-on-one coaching. If you're interested in joining the Wonder Woman, you can find us on Instagram, the Wonder Woman Official, or on our website, thewonderwoman.com. Thank you for asking. Oh, and please, my podcast, Stronger by Design. And Tony, I'll have to get you on there.
I would love to be there. Michelle, honor talking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Stronger with Time podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing or sharing it with someone who would benefit from hearing this. And if you're ready to go deeper, the 9-week Science of Thriving course is available now. The link is in the show notes.